So we met earlier in the roadmap session, and for those of you who know me, I love data quality. And data quality is the one thing that I actually have control over in Pure. And so all this functionality that I'm building in Pure, all of this, the cool features and so on, all of these are geared towards making sure that the data that's in your Pure is excellent. And now GenAI comes along and throws a huge spanner into the works. So there's this famous saying, like, if in the future I thought that the robots would be doing all the hard work and we would be doing all the art and science. But from a researcher's perspective, if AI did all of the admin, tidying up my abstract, adding additional keywords, generating my impact statements, then I can go back to doing research. That sounds like a fantastic situation. But coming back to research, I'm talking about the tools that are already available to us, not just Impact AI, but just in the wild, so to speak. If you go to ChatGPT and you look up for specific GPTs related to academic research, there's so much out there. These abstract generators, review analysis tools, you can write research notes using all of these GPTs and so on. And thinking of all of this information that you could, all of these tools that you can tap into and all of this information that you can add to Pure. And if we come back to the original purpose, so this is from the Code of Good Practice in 1998, generated by Eurocris and Cordis. So all of these 17 points here, this is what a CRIS needs to be able to support. But sum it all up, it's identify, facilitate, promote, analyze, inform, evaluate, and exploit research. So with the introduction of GenAI, there are a lot of positive benefits for RIMS, and these are split. I categorized them across three broad categories here. So creation and enrichment, curation and classification, and process and efficiency. So for creation and enrichment, a couple of examples. So within Pure, let's say in the near future, I'd like to automatically generate research data summaries and abstracts, or with a click of a button, I'd like to identify new research opportunities based on my current research corpus. So being able to enrich Pure with more comprehensive and accessible information for researchers, but also the senior stakeholders at the institution. In the next classification, so curation and classification, being able to, for example, as Soren has done as a living prototype, is be able to categorize and clean data or tag data using ChatGPT in Soren's specific case, but also just in general being able to use natural language processing to be able to understand content and context. So imagine coming to the Pure portal in the future and be able to use a search term and have a GPT-style answer saying, these are the experts from this institution, this is a research area that the institution is focused on, and so on. So helping visitors to the portal better understand what's happening at that institution. And in terms of the process and efficiency, there's a lot of things that can be done at scale and at speed by different generative AI, but AI in general, or machine learning in general. And for senior stakeholders, being able to have ideas about what are future research directions that the head of research could follow. And coming to my favorite slide, and I think everybody knows this one, data quality. So the 5 C's of data quality. So this is something that we developed at Pure and we share worldwide. So data needs to be complete, correct, connected, current, and compliant. So all of these, of course, are relative. If I don't have a portal, do I need to showcase my research? Does it need to be complete? So we did a survey approximately 3 years ago, asking all of our Pure customers, which of these 5 C's do you value the most? Very interesting. And most people said, correct. I want my data to be correct. And there are different institutional constraints to this as well. So how many people on your Pure team? If you cannot have 10 people on your Pure team manually doing the workflow steps for Pure and making sure the content that comes in is correct, how can you stick to the correct element of data quality? And of course, as I mentioned, this is needs-based. If your senior stakeholders want to be more interested in compliance with their funders, there's a specific focus in one of the 5 C's here. So I'm racing ahead here because there's a lot to talk about with the negative effects of GenAI. So remember from the Code of Good Practice here, everything here is everything to do with research. And one of the primary focuses of research is, of course, funding. So what are the negative effects of generative AI on funding? And this is partly due to the training, the underlying data that feeds into the model. So with outdated, irrelevant, or biased training data, what happens if you have a focus or you incorrectly focus on widely publicized funding, because the more research that gets funding, the more public it becomes, and you actually miss out on niche opportunities that generative AI may not be able to help you with, which leads to perhaps poor funding decisions, or even, in the worst case, duplicating research efforts. Another effect that that outdated, irrelevant, and biased training data has is that we tend to have a focus on the wealthier countries because these produce the most data. And so we're focusing, if we're a developing nation and our university will inevitably follow the path of developed nations with lots of money, but not necessarily give developing nation institutions an opportunity to focus on their own context, their own needs when it comes to research. There are a lot of effects, of course, on security and privacy. So if you're training your own large language model, how much of the specific and perhaps sensitive information can you use to train it? The more effective the model becomes, the more data that you add to it that's specific to your context, the more perhaps chance that you include data that shouldn't be included. And we talked a little bit in some of the questions from the Impact AI, where you're surfacing information that shouldn't be surfaced. And we now know that there's large language model prompt injection attacks, where you can trick ChatGPT into revealing its training data or revealing sensitive information about how the model was created. And of course, for Europeans, of course, how is my data being used? How is my institution using my data when it comes to training models and so on? And of course, this leads to how do we align this with GDPR and other frameworks? So all very important questions. And these are not just, you could break these down by regional differences, of course. So in the EU, of course, we have a strong focus on open science and cross-border collaboration. We have a strong attitude towards AI and privacy in general, so perhaps that should actually be a green, positive thing. And of course, there are different models and different cultural biases that creep into the training data, no matter what we try to do about it. In the US, of course, like the use of AI and generative AI specifically, it's innovative, it creates engagement, but we perhaps are becoming over-reliant on it. We're perhaps not realizing the resource intensity that this actually does. There's this old joke that, inside a computer game, a light burning in a game is burning real electricity. And it's the same with generative AI. Every query that you send is a cost to it, a real electrical cost. And so we need to think about what are the opportunities that we have to reduce this reliance and resource use. So I'm racing ahead here. So if I'm going too fast, tell me to slow down. So how do we strike a balance between these positive and negative effects? First of all, governance. So, Sean has been talking a lot about governance, like how do we improve the models? How do we have, what opportunities do we have to learn more about the model that we're training? What type of data goes into it? And perhaps the best way to do this is to create guides for specialists, but even non-specialists like ourselves. So Elsevier has Elsevier AI, and we got a whole lot of training on how to use it, what should be done with it. So perhaps this should be standard for the course. For every user that comes to Pure in the near future, should be a guide on how do I use this AI tool effectively and safely. And of course, that leads to the security and privacy concerns. What data do I share and where? Elsevier has very strict policies on how we use Elsevier ChatGPT. We shouldn't be using it. We should be using Elsevier AI. But the idea being that with commercial models, for example, we're never quite sure what's happening with the data. If your data comes from Pure, we know it only comes from Pure and it'll stay within Pure. Same with Impact AI. We know where the data comes from. We know how it's modeled. We know the restrictions and so on. And we know the importance that customers place on their data. And of course, the engagement here. I mean, we've perhaps been caught up in the hype of AI, which is slowly, I wouldn't say dying down, but we need to constantly remind ourselves that our engagement here requires a little bit of oversight. And there's some further, and I'll say from a product manager perspective, some product governance when it comes to GenAI in RIMS and in Pure specifically. So we as a product team need to be sure that any implementation of a GenAI tool needs to comply with GDPR and other regulations to make sure that there's some transparency for the customer, but also for the user specifically. And we need to figure out how do we mitigate against bias and ethical AI use. You know, there are different strategies and clear strategies for detection and mitigation, but we need to have a real discussion amongst us as technology providers, but also you as our customers, on how and what should be ethical AI and practical AI applications. So the equitable access and support. So I talked earlier about developing nations. How can we provide the same level of technological support to institutions that may not be able to afford it, for their users that may not have access to paid AI services or Gen AI services? And one of the last points, perhaps one of the most interesting, of course, this hybrid model and human expertise. So the survey that we did on data quality a couple of years ago, one of the biggest sticking points was, how comfortable do you feel with automated technologies or machine learning? And I think 80% of people said 3 out of 5. So they would rather be the final say, the final human say, in the end process of a generative AI data generation process. So there's a lot to be said about keeping people like Pure admins in the loop, keeping validators, keeping the editors in Pure, and having them have the final say. And just like with Impact AI, where we're able to review statements like this, that we get feedback, and that the user is able to click the save button after modifying it rather than Pure automatically saving that record. So I think when you put everything into balance, you have to figure out as an institution, but also as a technology provider, are we actually supercharging the way forward here? Are we supercharging the value of Pure? Are we supercharging the value my institution brings to society? Or do we run the risk of actually sabotaging all the work that we do? So it's a bold statement, it's strong, I know, I get that, but it is something we need to think about. So thank you for your time. I know I only had 25 minutes, so, okay, I've got some more time. But that was the end of the presentation. So hopefully lots of questions. And I'll leave this up here just to stimulate it a bit.
Any thoughts, comments on? It's I like the way it was put. There's sort of like it's always scary to get the machine to do things. I think about the self-driving cars. Like we still like that, just to know that the steering wheel's there at the end to just maybe control things. But what do people think about in relation to particularly what Thomas has been talking about? Maybe where we see things going for maybe Pure and some of these bulk changes and things like that in particular that Thomas has particularly been working with for a very, very long time. Do you have any thoughts on that, about sort of visions? And
yeah, so maybe I'm going to ask a question to the audience. So Soren, specifically, sorry for calling you out here, because I know Soren has been doing some amazing work using ChatGPT to analyze content from Pure already. So Soren, have you encountered any issues with, obviously there's a strong sense of data privacy already built into what you're trying to achieve, but have you realized that there are fallbacks to using GenAI tools? And perhaps talk a little bit about the issues that you encountered.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think in general we're sort of running into some red tape or bureaucracy in terms of working with generative AI and the data in Pure at the university, because who at the university can make decisions? What are we allowed to do? Do we have to ask every researcher, or can we use the information which is already openly available? So they are some of the challenges we're facing at the moment. I don't think we've run into sort of any areas where we sabotage ourselves, at least not yet. But yeah, I agree. It's definitely something that we don't just blindly turn on the AI and let it handle everything for us. Also in terms of data quality. But in general, I think I'm pretty optimistic about it.
Yeah. If there was another content type that you could feed into the AI machine, what would that content type be from Pure?
Well, I think impact is quite an interesting content type because it's still fairly new and everyone's a bit unsure how to use it, and you don't have any clear definitions as to how to measure impact and work with it. So I think it's a great way to get the ball rolling, sort of, by using the content you already have in Pure. But also, I believe a very low-hanging fruit could be, to relate content in Pure. I mean, today you have to manually relate a publication with a press clipping and a project. I mean, that it would be quite easy, to automate this process somehow, and that would really create some value for us in terms of relating content in Pure.
Yeah, I suppose the sort of not the explicit relations, but the inferred relations between research, between specific keywords and research, and being able to use that to improve searchability on the portal.
Yeah, exactly. So, but also, to link research projects to related publications and press clippings and data sets and so on, because the data to do so is already in Pure. So it's just a matter of, finding the correct method of identifying it.
Yeah. Thanks, sir. Any other questions?
Yeah. So most of the AI are precise, but they are not accurate. So they often don't detect the outliers. So they're more of a popular index. But say like example, if I'm trying to search something, if you say that we are going to use GenAI into the Pure for a keyword search and other things. So it looks at a popular index. There could be one specific thing which is an outlier which I am searching, but the AI would drive you to a popular index. So how can you?
Yeah, that's for the technologists to figure out. I'm not that smart. Yeah. But it's a very good question, and I mentioned it earlier. If all of our training data is based on wealthy countries producing research based on their research agenda needs and so on, then of course the vector that leads us to an answer is going to be based on that prevalence of that data. And so how do we? I think this is a general problem for general machine learning, generative AI.
Yeah, I was just a bit surprised by the restraint you're showing about all this Gen AI stuff, because the more I think about it, I see so many opportunities, and also for my colleagues, because I do the data engineering at my library, and everybody's going, yeah, okay, we only have 1 or 2 of these people, so we can't really do advanced stuff. But once you go into AI, I was first thinking, okay, I'll do some AI and do some data quality. I got inspired by Soren, but then I started thinking, why not just load the entire Pure database into an AI model and just start conversing with my Pure instance? And then why do I still need a reporting module or a portal? And then if you look at quality, it's not so much about IT anymore, but my library colleagues can start conversing with the model and try to figure out what the quality is, and through feedback steer that. So I see a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, so you're just say this is not me excited. This is just me like, let's be a bit realistic. But I definitely see the opportunity here. I mean, Sean has definitely been speaking about this with Impact AI, and Sean and I have spoken a lot about what are the possibilities that we can do in Pure with this.
Yeah.
So yes, inside I'm excited. I'm just not that kind of
You're very Dutch in that.
Yes. I'm becoming more Dutch, yes. Yeah. Any last questions? You can always speak outside. I'll be here all week.
All right. I guess we can wrap it up then.
Thanks, Busher.
Thank you.